Hi, today I will talk about encryption, and I will talk about the difference between symmetric and asymmetric encryption. And I made one video about SSL and TLS where I talked about the type of encryption technologies, and I'm actually making these series where I'm just focusing on encryption. And today I will just focus and explain the difference between symmetric and asymmetric encryption. So in asymmetric encryption, let us say you have a message that you want to send to the other party. Let us say this guy over here is interested in sending a message to the other guy on, let us say, on a different planet, or maybe on the other side of the world. So let us say this guy's name is Thomas, and this guy is Andy. So when Thomas wants to send a message to Andy using the encryption, so what Thomas will do, let us say he is interested in sending this message, which is, let us say, a top secret document. He will use one key or a passphrase to encrypt the message. So using a key, Thomas can encrypt this message and send it to Andy on the other side. And when you receive the message, let us say when Andy receives the message on the other side, Andy can use the same key to also decrypt the message. So using the key, Andy can decrypt the message which was encrypted by Thomas, and this is the decrypted message, and Andy will use the same key to, of course, read the message. So this is the symmetric encryption where you're using the same key to encrypt and decrypt the message. And the challenge here is that you need to find a way to send this key securely to Andy. So you will probably use, let us say, a phone call, or maybe you will use an email, which is of course not secure, because if there is someone who is listening to their conversation, and if they get hold of the key, so there is no point of this particular encryption technique, which is symmetric encryption. So we need a way to ensure that we transfer the keys in secure fashion. So there is one technique which is called as asymmetric encryption. So the name is asymmetric encryption, and let us try to understand what exactly is the benefit of using asymmetric encryption, which is actually very common, and it is still being used widely over the internet. So let me first clear this. So in asymmetric encryption, there is a concept of key pair. So what the sender and the receiver will do, they will first use one algorithm, let us say using RSA algorithm. I'll probably write it down, and I'm sure you must have heard of this RSA algorithm. So you will first create a key pair on both the sides. So let us say we are talking about the sender, which is Thomas, and on the other side we have the receiver, which is Andy. So Thomas will create a key pair called as public key and private key. And Andy will do the same thing on his end. He will also use one algorithm, let us say RSA algorithm, to also create a public key and a private key. Now, with the help of RSA algorithm, the way it works is that you need to use public key to encrypt the message, and that message can only be decrypted using the private key, which is currently linked or mapped to the public key. So these two key pairs are actually linked to each other, but if you get hold of public key, you cannot really get hold of the private key, and vice versa. So the way it works is that, let us say, in this case, Thomas wants to send a message to Andy again using asymmetric encryption. So before they do this, they both need to exchange their public key. So what will happen now? Andy will send his public key to Thomas. So you will probably have this scenario where Thomas will get hold of the Andy's public key. So I'll probably write it down. And the public key. And Thomas will do the same thing. He will send his public key to Andy. So here I will write Thomas public key. Now what will happen now? Thomas will again create a message and decrypt it using Andy's public key. So using the Andy's public key which they exchanged earlier, Thomas will send the same message again to Andy, and when Andy receives the message on his end, he will use his own private key, which is definitely mapped and linked to the public key which Thomas used earlier. So using his own private key, Andy will decrypt this particular message that actually contains the actual information, and he can actually get hold of the information, or he will be able to decrypt the message that Thomas wants to send to Andy. So the good thing about this particular algorithm, or the asymmetric encryption, is that you just need to exchange your public key, which is kind of safe, but to decrypt the message, you need your own private key, which was generated as a key pair with the help of course, your public key and the private key, which are always linked to each other. And the challenge here is that you need to find a way, a secure way to keep your private key secret, and you also need to find a way to also ensure that your public keys are transferred or sent to the other guy or the other party in a secure fashion. And we'll talk about these techniques, or we'll cover in the next video. We'll talk about the authority who will ensure that the keys are transferred or managed at a central location. But as compared to the symmetric encryption, we are trying to solve the challenge, or we are trying to handle the situation where you don't need to use the same key to encrypt and decrypt.